when we are able to bring our story in, it's facts tell, stories tell, right? Um, for that marketing advice. But the connection is made in the stories. So for people who want to make a change, want to create change in an industry or in the world, really being able to motivate other people and create connection is part of that brand messaging, So especially with the younger generations, they connect with the message of your brand, and they're like, "That's that's the person I want to do
That's
business
my
with.
person, right? That's
That's my
stories really
person."
gets people to say that's my person, and I really agree with that totally. Hello, my extraordinary women friends. For the final episode of our Extraordinary Women Ignite speaker series, I am excited to introduce you to Colleen Kern. Colleen will be joining us at Ignite on October 24th through 26th, speaking on the topic of story, one of my favorite topics. As entrepreneurs, many of us have an origin story that drove us to start our business. These vulnerable stories can create deep connections, yet they are often kept hidden. When we share our stories openly, boldly, and authentically, we can inspire change and connect with others on a deeper level. Colleen Kern, a talented development content editor, has a knack for transforming written works. She helps subject matter experts and inspirational authors take their constantly rewritten drafts and turn them into published bestsellers. In today's episode, we'll dive into Colleen's love for stories and explore the power of origin stories. We'll discuss how to find the right story to share, how to approach sharing something emotionally charged, and why storytelling is so important for our brand and our business. Let's get ready to be inspired and discover the power of storytelling in your journey. Remember, Extraordinary Women Ignite is all about raising up your vision, your voice, and your visibility while building a business with more time prosperity and wealth prosperity. You will leave with a plan for 2025 to make your next up level happen. Get your tickets at cammiegelner.com/ignite and use the code EWR and get $200 off of your ticket. Now enjoy this episode and let's meet Colleen Kern. Well, welcome to Extraordinary Women Radio, Colleen. It's great to have you here today.
I'm so excited to be here and talk with you today.
Yeah, I know. I'm excited to chat with you too about story. It's one of my favorite topics. And I'm super excited that you're going to be at Ignite as a speaker, joining us and bringing all your brilliance to the room. So it's going to be awesome. Ignite's coming. I mean, it's going to be here. I mean, we're just a few months away. It'll be coming up pretty quick. Totally. So, I know you talk about story, and why did you fall in love with story?
Oh, I fell in love with story at a really young age and then resisted bringing it into my career forever. They always say, like, you are your brand, even when you are in corporate. And it was one of those things where I always was like, whatever. But as I embraced my creativity and came into my own, I started realizing that most entrepreneurs, anyone who wants to make a big change, has this really beautiful origin story. And there's always something that triggered, like, oh, that's the reason. That's the reason I want to make a change. They saw something, they experienced something, and they just have a really beautiful background story that I think is just, so captivating. When you see someone, you're like, well, why? Why do you do what you do? What is it that you love about it? They get animated. They start using hand gestures. Their facial expression changes. Everything about them changes. And I just think that those stories are so beautiful and unique and create connection.
I so agree. I mean, it's people just drop into their bodies when they're in story. Story was one of the things that actually helped me get past my own fear of speaking many years ago. I was like terrified to speak many years ago. And it was when I learned to start telling story on the stage that it was like, oh my gosh, that's fun, because we always know our stories, and it's always a way that we can, step into our brightest moments when we do that. So I'm curious, when you were a little girl, what was it? How did you engage in story as a little girl even?
So it all started with once upon a time, there in the north woods of Canada, there was a great, big, strong man. His name was Pierre de Frontenac. My mom used to tell me these stories that she got from my grandfather, her father, every night uh, before she tucked me in. And the story itself would change a little bit, it would evolve, but it always started the same, and it always ended with everything being resolved, and then going back and having a big bowl of porridge. And it just like I loved it. It was reassuring and it was beautiful. And I am a voracious reader. I love to read. I'll read anything with a good plot. I'll read anything that's my number one strength is learner. I love learning new things. So I pick up, I'm a book collector. So I just love being able to learn new things and dive into a story and escape a little bit or just relax into something. And I just think stories are so beautiful, whether it's in a book or on TV or you're listening to a podcast. There's just such beautiful elements that opens your eyes to the world around you. And it's just so much fun and
Yeah,
creates an opportunity for your imagination to kind of
totally. So
play and explore.
as a podcaster, I don't even want to talk to people that don't want to dive into their stories. It's like, it's a priority to be on this podcast. And if somebody just wants to come in and talk about their stuff, I'm like, yeah, no, that's not what we do here. You got to bring the story in because that's what connects to people. And that's where people feel it. So
Oh, wow.
how did you, and speaking of stories, so I want to hear some of your story. How did you were a certified public accountant and then you made this transition into the world of writing and editing. So tell us more about that.
Um, so I became a CPA because it was safe, right? Um,
Yeah.
it, I grew up, I had some chronic illness growing up, and it was always like, go to school. Like our family motto was education is power. So it was always go get the degree, get something practical. I started in political science because I enjoyed the debate, the stories, right? Um, and when I went and I looked at the potential jobs, if you're not a politician in political science, it's like bank manager, retail manager. I'm like, okay, maybe not. So when I found an accounting class, it just clicked for me, and I quickly realized it either clicks for people or it does not. And so since it clicked for me, I was like, I'll be safe. I'll always have health insurance. It'll be great. And I kind of found that that's not always true. It really depends on the organization you're working for. Um, and after some time, I was just like, this doesn't necessarily fit for me anymore. And I was at a crossroads, and I decided to go all in and get my CPA license. And as I was doing that, I actually got involved with, picked up by PwC they're one of the big four accounting firms,
Yeah.
those who don't know, to contract on the Deepwater Horizon claim settlement, which was the BP oil spill.
Oh
And
gosh.
on that project, it was forensic accounting. I got to do all this analyzing of documents and write summaries. I got to work with fraud, waste, and abuse, which was a cross-vendor team. And my part of the project was analyzing financial documents as a CPA. But the claim settlement had like 7, I don't even remember anymore, it was so long ago, um, many different categorizations. And so there was like wildlife and fisheries guys and lawyers, and a lot of the higher ups managing this part of the program had no accounting experience. They understood fraud, but they didn't have any accounting background. So it's really where I started to really be able to take expert language and the big words and bring them down into accessible language. And it's where I started
Mm.
being like, okay, I need to write this succinctly, I need to write it clearly, and it still has to convey that same story as if I had had, pages and pages to write up my report and fit it in this little Excel box too. It was a lot. So it's where I started to really learn to edit and write in a way that was compelling
Interesting.
and told a story.
Uh,
Um, and
and
at
very
the
technical writing there, right? I
oh
mean, that was, deeply
yeah,
technical.
deeply
Um,
technical, and
mhm.
being able to convert that into accessible language was, for me, it was like novelty. It was challenging. It was enjoyable. And it really then, when that part of the project ended and I went back to analyzing claims, I was like, this is boring. I don't want to play with numbers anymore. Um, so when I left that project, I've done so many random things. Um, my earbud keeps falling out of my ear. That when I left, I started doing health coaching because I saw around me how unhealthy some of the habits of professionals are. We eat at our desk. We do the Fitbit challenge, but we kind of go like this to get our steps in, and
And
cheat
she's
a little
moving
bit.
her arm for those of you listening to the podcast.
Yeah, so like we'll get our steps eventually. So there was a lot of unhealthy habits in the profession. So I was like, oh, I'll have like a built-in clientele if I become a health coach. And what I learned was I really love writing more than
Yeah,
I enjoy help, like coaching people and what to do,
right.
telling them what to do. I loved writing about health and everything. Um, and I had a little bit of hubris. I was like, "Psh, I'm an accountant. How hard could running a business be? Like, how hard could marketing be? Like, whatever." Um, that is a steep learning curve when you're going it alone. Like, it
Yep.
is,
So you
you
always,
know,
if you can put people around you, it's a good thing. That's for sure.
oh, for sure.
Yeah.
And so I had to go back to the accounting world for a little bit. And when I did, I ended up writing for an accountant. Like I got my first paid writing gig in a CPA firm, wrote a few blogs, and that's where my next paid gig was writing all of the marketing materials for a CPA firm. So that's where I started to really get into being like, okay, copywriting. And then as that progressed, I started getting more requests for critiques and editing. And I was like, well, don't push the river, go where, people want you to be. And I love editing. I really do. It's just,
That's awesome.
uh,
So today you edit, what are the things you edit today? What's
I,
some of the scope of your projects?
so primarily I love working with self-publishing authors who
Mm-hmm.
are, like sometimes first time, sometimes established authors. But I love working with nonfiction authors who are subject matter experts, who want to make a change, who have like a goal. They want to create a community. They want to do more than just like put their knowledge in a book. They want to make a connection with their
Mm-hmm.
audience because
Mm-hmm.
they have a goal of being consultants or speakers. So they're kind of those business card books. Um, but a lot of times experts kind of get in their head a bit.
Oh,
And,
totally.
you know, when you're an expert, you don't always realize you're speaking expertise and, have a tendency to throw in some SAT words. And, you need a fresh set of eyes to go like, hey, I need to bring this down. Like let's use another word here. Does this still mean the same thing? Because, like in accounting, there's not really another word for financial statement. So sometimes you
Right.
have to use the same word. And there's not some alternative.
Yeah.
Uh, and
So
I
you
love
help,
that.
it kind of goes back to that simplification and really making it concise and,
Yeah. And then
yeah.
I find I get a lot of people who have sensitive topics. So subject matters experts are one of them, and then
Uh-huh.
people who have a sensitive topic such as grief um, or loss,
Mm-hmm.
loneliness. I've done a
Mm-hmm.
few, and
Mm-hmm.
then it's really sensitive topics like domestic abuse and or
Mm-hmm.
sexual abuse, where you need that gentle, compassionate touch. It's scary to share that
Yeah.
information with someone for the first
Yeah.
time and be like, "This is my
Yeah.
story. Please be gentle."
Yeah.
Um, so I like being that soft place to land where it's like, yes, we
Mm.
can go through this, and I'm not going to go through here with a hatchet and just
Right.
rip your thing to shreds. I'm going to actually come through with a really gentle touch and be like, how does this word feel, rather than be like wrong,
Yeah.
and just really gentle touch.
True. I
So
like that a lot. So like that a lot. And I think that, there's people, so many people in my community are writing books and wanting to put books out into the world. So I think that makes so much sense.
yeah.
Tell us about the crayon connection to what you do.
So it's always the hardest thing to write about yourself. So
Mm-hmm.
uh, excuse me. Uh, so I was working with Kate Payne
Mm-hmm.
on my LinkedIn profile, and we
Mm-hmm.
were interviewing. We were talking about my background story and how I love not starting with a white page and I love coloring. And she was like, "Have you ever made that connection between the coloring and the crayons and editing?" And I was like, "Oh my god, she's so smart." Um,
She is. She's
th-
brilliant.
she is absolutely brilliant. And so when I was young, I spent a lot of time in hospital rooms and in the ER. And every time I went in, I would get a fresh box of crayons.
Mm-hmm.
And that scent still brings back my creativity. And what I learned was that I loved being able to take a coloring page and embellish it if I had the energy and really go really detailed, or keeping it really simplistic and blended and kind of easy. And she's like, kind of like editing, isn't it? You're not starting with that blank page. There's no, oh my God, a blank page. Ugh, can't possibly.
Yeah. Right.
So it allows you to kind of be like, okay, let's embellish this, or let's, keep this really simplistic. Maybe let's bring this back again, that simplicity piece, right? Let's bring that back into simplicity. And I was like, oh my God, now the fact that I have the whole set of crayons, I mean, now I'm gonna have to display them in my office. And she's so fun, and we're in the same community and everything. And she got me crayon rings for my birthday. She's so sweet. I love
Oh,
it.
that's awesome. I love that. So it's really about the blank page and how you can make it fun, and the
Yeah.
creativity can come to life with that. Let's talk about origin stories. How does someone know what the right story is to share?
Ooh, that's a good question. Um, I think it really comes back to what points are you trying to convey, and how does it connect to your messaging? So for me, a lot of the stories I tell circle back to boldly sharing your story, being vulnerable, and being authentic. And that there is connection to be made through your story. And who do you want to connect with? So um, I have lots of stories.
We
Not
all
all of
do,
them are,
right?
yeah, and not all of them are appropriate for, a business setting. Some of them are, I lived in New Orleans for almost 7 years, so some of them are very, gotta be careful with those. And
Those New Orleans stories.
those New Orleans stories, gotta, put on some rosy glasses for some of those. And, so I think it's really, what connection are you going to make? Is it going to actually circle back into your messaging, or circle back to the point you're trying to make?
Right.
Don't be vulnerable for vulnerable sake. Just,
Oh, right. That's so
it,
true.
does it make sense to share that part of your life? Like,
Yeah.
um, for me, I shared this year for the first time, because I did a speaking contest. I shared part of my medical journey this year. And for me, the first time I shared it, oh my God, it came back, and I was like, all of a sudden, I was like, oh, I just shared that with this entire room. Oh my God. And so if that's going to make you like freak, keep it a little closer or edit some bits out. But there is also some true beauty in actually sharing all parts of your story and
Totally.
not editing out those sharp edits or edges. Um, I recently was at a conference, and someone was giving their testimonial of how they had gone through the program, and they didn't leave anything out. They left in all their vulnerability of how their work was, how their cash flow was, their weight journey, their health journey. And you never know which piece is going to resonate with your ideal client. So she said one thing, and I was like, that's me. Oh my God, that's me. And, so you never really know who in the audience has a similar journey. So if you can bring it back into the overall message, there's
Yeah.
and it can be scary. That's why I say boldly sharing your story,
Yeah.
because it can be nerve wracking to share
It
those
can be.
vulnerable
And
bits.
I think, and those vulnerable moments can be really a way that we connect with people in the audience. But I love that you say, don't share it just for vulnerability's sake. Really have that
Right,
line, that thread into that connection into your work.
right.
And the other thing I say is don't share something that you're deeply in the mix of,
Oh, right,
right?
yes,
Share something that you're past and beyond,
right,
and so that you can go back and you can pull those lessons forward.
right.
And I
Because
think that
you
really
need
is
that
important.
hindsight.
Yeah,
You know,
totally, totally, totally. Um, why is story so important to our brand and our business?
I think we've touched on that a little bit. It's
Sure.
um when we are able to bring our story in, it's facts tell, stories tell, right? For that marketing advice. But the connection is made in the stories. So for people who want to make a change, want to create change in an industry or in the world, really being able to motivate other people and create connection is part of that brand messaging. So especially with the younger generations, they connect with the message of your brand, and they're like, that's the person I want to do
That's
business
my
with.
person, right? That's
That's my
stories really
person.
gets people to say that's my person, and I really agree with that totally. First,
Yeah.
because there's so many people they can choose from, and so often if somebody can hear or they can see themselves in somebody else's story, it creates credibility, it creates connection. It's such a powerful step. So at Ignite, what will you be teaching at Ignite?
So at Ignite, I'll be touching on a lot of these points too, and just the power of when we boldly share our story, we truly create the connections that enable us to create the catalyst to change the world. And, part of that is when we share our stories, we create an opportunity for inclusion. You know, so many of us have stories that we're like, oh, I'm going to keep that close to my chest. I don't want anyone to know. But like, I see this a lot in, the uptick in all the short form videos is that there are creators out there sharing their chronic illness journeys and sharing about disabilities that people are like, I didn't know that. I didn't know that about myself. Um, and creating that connection to create additional advocacy and bring other people in. Uh, when we are able to share our stories boldly, we are able to create that connection too. So it's like we are
Yeah.
able to be like, oh, like you said, we see ourselves in the other person.
Yeah.
And we're like, mm-hmm, that's the person I want to work with. Or, you know what? They're on to something. I'm going to stop doing, or I'm going to start doing XYZ.
Yeah.
So that's where the change really starts to happen. And I want to talk more about that at
Excellent.
Ignite.
I love that. And it's going to fit so beautifully because we go into really building your brand from the inside out and bringing that to life. Really talking about the thought leadership that you're bringing out into the world as a leader, and then weaving the story into the mix of that. So I think it's going to fit really beautifully with that week. We also talk about what's that big vision that you want to be creating for your business, and how do you build the business that matches that vision for your, it's the right work life balance, it's the right packaging and pricing, it's all the right components, and when you weave in story into the mix of it, it's really really powerful. Where can people learn more about you, Colleen?
So I'm very active on LinkedIn,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm Colleen D. Kern on LinkedIn. And I'm at my website, writeeditecc.com. And that's also my handle on all the socials. So I can be found at writeeditecc,
Excellent.
on all the
Excellent.
socials.
And then the final question I always close with is, what are 3 pearls of wisdom you'd like to leave with us today?
Just three. One, embrace your story. So you really need to own your story before you start to share your story. Um, get messy and play in
Yes.
your creativity. Um,
Yes. Get the
be
colors out and scribble all over.
do it, just do it. Get messy. It's the first part of really honing any messaging. It's kind of getting messy and figuring out what needs to go. And I think people want it to be perfect right away. So get messy. Don't be afraid, and um, share it anyway. You know,
Yeah.
for a long time, I kept a lot of my story and my self hidden and really, really just behind the mask. Nope, got to be in my corporate suit. But share it anyway. The people that you want to work with want to know you.
Yes. So agree. So agree. Well, thank you so much. I look forward to having you in Colorado in October. And thank you so much for bringing your wisdom today.
Thank you. This was amazing.